Today we are celebrating the 500th episode of the podcast. That's coming up on this episode 500 of WDW Prep to go. Hello and welcome to WDW Prep to go, where we talk strategy and ideas and have lots and lots of trip reports. I am your host, Shannon Albert from WDWPrepSchool.com, and today is a different kind of episode. It is the 500th one. You've heard me over the last several months balking at the number. Like, what do you mean we're at 486 or 491? Because I just felt like, oh, we're creeping close to that number. And I'm not super great at milestones. I'm super great at like stopping to acknowledge, whatever that has happened over the last several years. But 500 felt like one worth celebrating. And so I wanted to take the time to do that today, a little break from trip reports, although the feedback on the trip reports is always good. The most recent ones have been especially good. And I will get right back to that soon. But it seems like a good time to stop and just talk about how it all began. I think there's probably a lot of stuff that people don't know from the beginning, and we're going to talk through that today. And then you will know, and we can then move on to the normal, regularly scheduled episodes. But today is a good one. So this podcast started back in August of 2013. August 18th, 2013, specifically. The website had started in May of 2012. I quit my full-time job in around that time, May of 2013. So about a year after I started the site, I quit my job to do it full-time. I wasn't making anywhere close to my previous corporate salary, but it was gaining a lot of traction. And so I thought, okay, if I quit my full-time job, then it'll give me time to do other things. And that included launching a podcast. So that's why the timing worked out the way that it did. My original intent for starting the podcast was just because I love podcasts. And I think that can be enough sometimes because you know what you like, you know what works, et cetera. And so you can kind of dive in. My background is as a programmer. I have a degree in programming. I worked as a programmer for corporations, and then I was a technical project manager. So starting a website and the technical side of things came quite easily to me. And then I learned to write and edit photos and things because I was the only person that worked on the website. I used to post 3 times a week on the website by myself. And so I was learning that. And then I'm like, okay, now I have to learn about recording and how audio works and all this kind of stuff. So it was a totally different skill set, but I just wanted to do it because I love podcasts. The name WDW Prep to Go was chosen because, in my mind, it's information you can take it with you. It's to go. So you can, pop the podcast in your ears and go on a walk. You can go on a car, a drive, a commute to work, whatever it is, do chores. I use podcasts for all of those things. And so I was like, oh, it's WDW Prep, but you can take it with you. You don't have to be sitting at your computer and, reading an article or something like that. And so that's where the name came from. It is a little difficult to say out loud, as you've noticed over the years, WDW Prep to Go. And every episode, when I edit it, the software automatically generates a transcript, and it almost never interprets the name correctly because it's hard to say. But that's where the name came from. It began way back then as solo episodes that I recorded on an iPad while sitting in my primary bedroom closet. That is how it started. I had an app on the iPad, and it had a soundboard, and I would literally play the intro clip on the soundboard while recording the intro. And then I had like a basic outline of what I wanted to say in the episode. And then at the end, I would play the outro clip, and then I would export it from the iPad app, and it would go up to the host, and then it would get published out like that. That is literally how it started. I was in the primary closet because it had a lot of fabric. And so for like soundproofing reasons, it was good because all the clothes were there and it was actually carpeted. And so it was just a good sound area to be. And for a long time, I never edited. I never edited. I just literally recorded on a soundboard in an app and I exported it and that was it. Because when you're starting something new, it's hard to know how to do everything. So I'm like, okay, let me figure out how to record. Let me figure out how to get a podcast out. How am I going to speak? This is a new skill for me. And then later I learned editing. And so it really started off in a very, very different way than it has progressed to now. The very first episode that I sat down to record in my closet was called How Do You Fit in All the Shows at Hollywood Studios? And it's because touring when you are trying to look at rides is one thing, and when you're trying to look at show times is another. And so to me, it felt like a puzzle. Like, let me start off by talking about how to do the rides and fit in the puzzle of the shows because Hollywood Studios has so many options. And so I decided I was going to talk about that. And this is how that sounded. How do you create a touring plan for Hollywood Studios when there are so many shows to include? That's coming up on this episode 1 of WDW Prep to Go. Sound familiar? Same music? 900. That's 414-939-7900. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. And I had a phone number back then, apparently, where you could call in. Now we have SpeakPipe. So anyway, it started off like that, where I was just kind of solo and doing these topics that weren't very long. I'm trying to see how long that one was. That one was 15 minutes because that's all I had to say about how to fit in the shows. And I would say those kind of topics are what I do on YouTube now. That's more of a YouTube links nowadays. And so I like having that as an outlet since most of the podcast episodes are trip reports. So how to fit in all the shows at Hollywood Studios would totally be a YouTube video. Maybe I need to do that now as a 2026 update to that episode. Incidentally, if you want to listen to any of the old episodes, they're on the website. There's a audio player embedded because podcast players usually only load the last so many because the feed can take too long to load if you're loading 500 episodes. So the audio player on the website, at the end of every episode where I say, go to www.prepschool.com, click on podcast at the top, scroll down to episode blah, blah, blah. So podcast at the top, and you can scroll down to any of the 500 episodes because there's an audio player embedded. You're just probably not going to find it in your podcast app. So one thing that was a surprise to me is how much the trip reports took off because I started one on those on episode 14, and the title was literally a chat with a Disney World first timer before and after her trip. That's it. And I thought that was going to be a one and done because I was going to go back to my solo episodes and just do that. But that format took off and has been the main kind of content for the last many, many years. And it's just a testament to how you have to constantly be evolving, adjusting, and seeing what works in this job. It's not really very predictable to figure out, exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work. One thing I was surprised at and didn't expect was how many people are going to listen with their kids. As a podcast listener myself, I listen to lots of podcasts, and it never occurred to me that children would be into the content as well. But it makes sense if you were putting on a podcast in the car and running errands and your commutes to work and school and all that stuff that the kids would be listening as well. But also, I am someone that grew up when kids weren't asked for their opinions, and so it's not always something that I think about a lot, but hello to the kids that listen. That was not something I anticipated 13 years ago, but it is a thing that has definitely happened. The Patreon community is not kid-friendly. I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but the main podcast episodes, everybody can listen and learn from them. It just wasn't what I expected before I hit record that very first time. Over the last several years, I have had a podcast producer. Before that, I did it all alone forever and ever. But for a few years now, I have had help. And that is why I have not missed a single episode in years. Never, ever miss an episode. Almost every podcast I listen to has breaks that they take. But I feel like we can fit this job in around schedules. So, I set the recording schedule for guests. Like I say, I'm available on these dates, then we record and then I'll edit it to go up. And as long as I can control that schedule, I can still also have, a life outside of work, but it's only because I have help to make that happen. Someone who listens to your speak pipe voicemails, who schedules the guests, who makes sure that the episodes are planned and uploaded. That's it. But I do all the other stuff. I did have an editor for a little bit, but I found the turnaround to be difficult because sometimes I'll finish a trip report on Saturday and it has to be ready to go up for patrons on Monday and to the main feed on Tuesday, and that's just too quick for me to be uploading these huge files to somebody else, expecting them to edit and send it back. So it's just easier for me to do it. So it is me and a podcast producer that does it. It's a small team. However, hiring someone to help did mean incorporating ads because people need to get paid for their jobs. I didn't make anything on the podcast for many, many years, which might ask a, business person, why would you do it if it doesn't make money? And not everything has a direct correlation to money. Sometimes you just do things and you figure out later exactly how it fits in, and it does make money now. There are ads now because we need to, pay salaries and things, but it also just has the benefit of connection to other people, and not everything is about revenue. Obviously, if I want to mention a company that we're partner with or something that we are doing, I can do that here, but in general, it's not what I think about when I sit down to hit record. Just trying to create an ecosystem really for the business with all different kinds of content. Let's talk a little bit more about the format of the trip reports because, as I mentioned, I thought it was going to be a one and done on episode 14 and then ended up coming back as the main content later. The pre-trip and post-trip format was to show how much things can change. I think over the years, some people have thought that it was too like you could get an A on your Disney World trip if your pre-trip and your post-trip matched, and that is not the case at all. I really, really wanted them to be different. Like of course, you want to go in with a good plan, but a good planner also knows to pivot because not everything's going to work out exactly how you expect it. You can just make some good guesses, and that's that. On a personal level, I will tell you one of the reasons I like this format is that I grew up in a household as a child where I had a mom that liked to plan trips but did not like to be flexible. So there was absolutely no consideration for somebody not feeling well, somebody being tired, somebody being interested in something different, which is partially an indicator of when I grew up, because back then kids just really were not given the kind of voice that they are now, but also rigid rigid parent. And so as an adult, I'm like, I will never do that to somebody else. So let's make sure that the podcast reflects that. And that's why we do it. We want it to change. Originally, the guests could submit to be a guest via email, and so people would literally email and say, "I wanna be a guest," and then when you'd hit record, you never knew what you were gonna get. And sometimes that meant people that were hard to understand because they were kind of mumbly or they were really quiet and shy. And so that's why we introduced the speak pipeline, because we need to be able to hear your voice. Can you project? Are you confident enough to at least leave a voicemail so that when we book you as a guest, we can be reasonably confident that we'll be able to, understand your voice and that it will come through. But originally it was email. Guests for the trip report episodes are purposely chosen to be as diverse as possible. And I think that I have probably mentioned that multiple times over the years, but we literally want them to be as diverse as possible. Sometimes I will have lots of reports in a row where I've only spoken to women and I'll say, hey, we haven't, had a lot of men in a while. Let's do that. We like different family makeups, different ages, types of families, different situations. And I think that keeps it interesting. And thankfully, most of you do as well, because I think there's things to learn from everyone. And even if you don't, have something you can learn for your own trip, I think it's nice to listen to other people and how they have been able to figure it out for their trips. There have been a ton of fantastic guests over the years, many of whom have become personal friends. Like, you spend so many hours talking, and then it's like, "Oh, and you're also a patron, and we've met in real life, and we've gone on trips together." And so it's just how any relationship can build, but many of the guests have become friends from, after the trip reports were recorded. There have been some really memorable trip reports, and there also have been some trip reports that didn't make it to air. So on Patreon, the pre-trips get posted in real time. Like if I record it on Tuesday, it is usually posted Tuesday or right after. And that way the patrons can hear the plans and then sometimes follow along with that person on social media, depending if they have accounts and are posting. But then when the post trip is posted to patrons, they can listen to the post trip only and not both of them together. But as patrons have noticed, there's been a few pre-trips over the years that did not lead to post-trips. And, there are a couple of episodes that got published that in retrospect probably shouldn't have been, and so nowadays, like in 2026, if certain circumstances came up, I probably wouldn't publish them. And you might ask, why wouldn't something get published? And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna name names or specifics, but I will say in general, I don't want to publish any kind of episode where the person is overly negative. And I'm not saying you can't have negative experiences because clearly you can, and we want to hear about that. But just overly negative the whole time doesn't make for good listening material. Another is someone who clearly had not listened to the podcast, and so when they came on, they were saying random things that they learned from YouTube videos that were not accurate and doing really wild transportation things, like going from here to there to catch a, cab from there to there, and I was like, "Okay, this is gonna be more confusing." So, like, it was a lot of bad information that didn't make sense. So that, bad information, bad attitude, not gonna get published. It is so rare. It's only been a couple in all these episodes, so we don't wanna publish those. There have been some really fantastic trip reports over the years that I really enjoyed. A lot of your favorites are also my favorites because they're just fun to listen to in real time, just like they're fun to listen to in editing. I do have a soft spot for Kat from Australia because she was so enthusiastic. It was one of our longer episodes, and she was so enthusiastic, and the whole thing was, not only a lot of stuff going on, but at the end, she had a happy story. But also, I got to meet her in between recording the pre-trip and post-trip because I was at Disney World for one of my own trips while she was there, and so that just made it extra special, and then, I asked her to come back and record an update as well. So I have a soft spot for her, but I really like a lot of the guests. There are some top episodes of all time. Would you like to know the top 5? Number 5 is, episode 230 with Melissa T. It was a solo trip. Melissa is a friend of mine, and she's actually at Disney World right now. She's a frequent visitor, and she thinks that maybe she was the first solo episode, which might have made it more interesting. Episode 321 was with Sharon, who is a repeat guest and also a friend. And Sharon has her own podcast now. She does a podcast about Run Disney and combining some of the things that she loves, which includes Run Disney. Her Sharon's podcast is Bib and Tiara, and it just launched recently. The 3rd most popular episode is episode 299 with Sarah C. And the 2nd most popular episode, 308 with Heather C. And the number 1 episode of all time, episode 284 with Marcus and his family going to Disney World. Uh, it was for their first time, if I'm not mistaken, it was their first time. And if I recall correctly, he did an incredible job. I think that people have a soft spot for the first timers, which is how the whole thing started. I originally wanted to have first timers on, but we evolved it into, all kinds of guests. And it might be very apropos that the episode right before this one was with a first timer, and that episode has been extremely popular amongst you all as well. So good job, Marcus. You were a delightful guest, and lots of people agree because you're the number 1 most downloaded episode of all time, episode 284. All of those guests, and those were the top 5. If I kept going on the list, there would be even more recognizable people, but what they all have in common, they're all patrons, and I have a really soft spot for patrons. So Patreon was started before 2020, but didn't really take off until about March 2020. So we went all in on Patreon in March 2020 because we didn't have anything else to do. And by we, I mean Heather and I. Heather had been on the Main Feed podcast a time or two before that, but I didn't feel comfortable exposing her to the public in the way that I expose myself to the public and the criticism that can come with that. And so Patreon felt like a better fit, but also because I do Patreon with her, I am more laid back, unhinged, more myself because we are very good friends in real life. And I can't put on main feed podcast voice for Heather because it doesn't work. So it's much more conversational over there. And in March 2020, we had a good reason to just start posting there together. Having a community, as it turns out, very important than I had ever imagined. We did it as a way to feel like we were being productive in some way on Patreon, but it still exists, very, very strong ways almost 6 years later, and of all the bad things that happened in 2020, I am really thankful that this thing happened because it created something that has become much more important, and I wouldn't have known it, I think, without the, shutdowns happening. It feels like a space where I can be myself and just kind of be, unfiltered. And it is not kid friendly as a result. So we always like to put that PSA out there. And the slogan that I like to use for Patreon is come to Patreon for me, but stay for Heather, because I think that's often how it works. People are like, yeah, I want more Disney, content. And then people are like, oh, but we really like her now that we've gotten to know her. Many patrons have become friends. We have meetups during our trips. We go on trips together. We're going on a cruise together in April with dozens of us. And that has been a fantastic side effect. We did a trip to Marceline, Missouri. I think it was a year and a half ago, something like that. We did a trip to Marceline, Missouri, which is where Walt is from. That's what Main Street is based on, is Marceline, and they have a museum. We did a special VIP tour. We went to a Disney exhibit as well in Kansas City. So that was really fun. We just go on all these like side quests together, and I love it. So Patreon is a fantastic community, and if you're not already a patron, you would be in great company if you would like to join because it is my favorite place on the internet and a place where I feel like I can be myself and in a little bit more like adult space and personal. It's more personal because I don't really talk about my personal life publicly. I think when you talk about things publicly, you give people permission to have, editorial on it. And I'm not interested in that. So I'm going to just keep it on Patreon where it feels a little bit more safe. Speaking of patrons, I think most of these are patrons, if not all. But it's people that love speak pipe messages for me to play during this episode. Jenny, who is the podcast producer, she sent me the links to the audio files, but I haven't listened to them. So we are going to listen to them together. Here are some thoughts from people that left messages.
Hello, Shannon and team. I just want to hop on here and say congratulations on 500 episodes. That is so huge, and what an accomplishment. I also just want to mention how thankful I am for the Patreon group. I've made such good friends and have got such helpful information over the last couple of years. That is one of my happiest places to be. So thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. Cheers.
Oh, nice. See, I didn't even plan that. So I don't have to promote Patreon by myself. I've got other people. So thank you for saying that. I'm glad that has been so helpful to you.
Oh, the love I have for this community is absolutely insane. It's those moments in your day where you get overly excited about something and you think to yourself, oh, is this a little bit silly? And then you just look online to the people that love exactly what you love and it makes you feel, oh my God, it makes you feel so good. This community is amazing. WDW Prep to go. While it's hard to say, it's not hard to love. Thank you. You're amazing.
See, it is hard to say. If I could do it all over again, I would choose a name that was easier to pronounce for all of us.
Hello, Shannon. My name is Roanne Hubbard. I'm from Ontario, Canada. I've listened since 2015 and really got interested in the trip reports during lockdown, I believe in 2020. I've been an avid listener ever since. Thank you so much for the community you've created. The podcasts are such a bright spot to my week, and I feel like I take a little bit of that magic with me when I listen. When I listen to them every week. So, thank you so much. Congratulations on 500 episodes of the podcast. All the best.
And thank you for leaving that message. Um, it's so interesting that the pandemic is when the trip reports became important. I feel like it was very polarizing. Some people liked listening so that they could feel some sort of escape from their own quarantine sometimes, and other people had a harder time with it because they thought, "Well, if I don't feel safe going, I don't wanna listen to it." But for a lot of people, it was fantastic.
My name is Erin, and I most remember listening to WDW Prep to Go when I was cleaning out my mom's house after she passed away. Even though that was a really hard time for me personally, just having the podcast on while I worked helped me remember that the magic is always there for me at Disney and brighter days are coming. I just have to keep looking for them. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's a really nice takeaway. You just never know how things can be incorporated into someone's everyday life. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sorry for the loss. Glad to be a little bit of a bright spot in the middle of the dark stuff.
Hi, Shannon and the WDW Prep School listeners. This is Melissa from Canada, and congratulations on your 500th episode. I started listening in 2016 when I thought I was planning my one and only adult Disney World trip. Obviously, I was wrong, since I have been back more times than I can count at this point. But the thing I really could not have predicted was the community that you would create and the friends that I would meet through it. I really just want to thank you, Shannon, for what you created, especially during the pandemic. The people that I've met, including yourself, have allowed me to really figure out who I am, to make big changes in my life, and to really just get to live as the person that I'm meant to be. And that's all because of a Disney podcast. And when I tell people that, they don't always understand, but I think it's something that this community has definitely felt, and it's something that you've been able to create. So I just wanted to say congratulations and thank you for everything that you have done.
That is Melissa, who I told you is the fifth most downloaded episode, who did a solo trip report, episode 230. And I also told you she's at Disney World right now, and she happens to be with a couple other people that she met through here. So thank you, Melissa. That was very sweet. I appreciate you.
Hi, my name is Kim, and I'm calling about the 500th episode of the WDW Prep School podcast. I found Shannon's website in 2015 when we were planning our first big family Walt Disney World trip, and also listened to the podcast as well. I had no idea what planning a Disney World trip was all about, and your website helped us immensely. We had an amazing trip, and everything was just nicely planned, and we had a great time. That was when my daughter is 9, and she's 20 now, and we still go as often as we can and still use the planning tools and the website, and everything has just made our trips amazing. I'm also a patron, have been since, I think, 2018. So I'm just so grateful for everything that you guys do, so thank you so much for the community you've built, and here's to 500 more episodes.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for saying that, but also 9 then and 20 now. I know what that math makes sense, but holy moly. So the kids listening, someday you're gonna be the adults, believe it or not.
Hi, WDW Prep Crew. This is Kristen in Nashville. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for the community that you've created. I have been listening since 2018 when I started planning my family's first trip to Walt Disney World. For a lot of personal and political reasons, this group became my safe space on the internet and the thing that I listen to when I seek a calming voice. Shannon, Heather, Jenny, Abby, it's important that you know that you're the people that I've turned to for joy and relief over the weird trials that the world has brought us over the years. Thank you for your hard work, your honesty, and of course, for your help making our Disney trips even more awesome. Truthfully, though, you could change the subject of the podcast to car parts or counting grains of sand, and I'd still listen happily. You gals are the best. Here's to 500 more episodes, ladies. Thanks again.
Kristen, also a former podcast guest and a friend. We did a patron meetup in Nashville with a bunch of patrons, and she was there. She's one of my favorite people in the world. I have a gallery wall with something framed from her, and I just adore her. Thank you, Kristen.
500. What an amazing milestone. You have touched so many lives and made so many trips so much better. I started listening before our first trip in 2021. I had sort of a panic moment and I found your podcast and we had an amazing trip. And we have, again, we are the typical, thought it was going to be our one and only trip. And we have multiple trips planned this year. I'm going on the patron cruise. You bring so much joy. Every single week, I look forward to listening to the podcast and learning new things and strategies. And I feel so much more confident. So thank you. Thank you for your time and your effort and your wisdom and bringing this community together. It just brings so much joy. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. What a kind message. I'm so glad the information's been helpful. I do think, wouldn't it be nice if Disney gave referral fees? Like people think they're going for one trip, but if you help them plan a good enough trip, they'll be back. That's the ideal.
This is Liz Lurinsky, former podcast guest and current patron. A little something for the 500th episode. I love listening to the trip reports, but more than anything, I love when Shannon and Heather and the gang travel together, stay up too late, and get punch drunk and record. It reminds me of sleepovers with friends or that first year of college where everyone is figuring out how to exist in the world. Love the podcast and couldn't have done my trips without you.
Oh, thank you, Liz. You just encapsulated the whole vibe of Heather and I. It feels like a sleepover, a punch drunk one, sometimes literally drunk. You know, you have a few drinks throughout the night and you go home to record, but definitely punch drunk always.
Hi, this is Sharon. I am a major fan of Shannon and Heather and the whole team at WDW Prep School. I became a fan, I don't know, when I first started going to Disney in 2018, I want to say, and I listened to all the podcasts, all the influencers, everyone. I was really, really shoulder deep in Disney planning content, and slowly but surely over the years, that has whittled down to what I have found the most useful, relatable, comforting, warm, wonderful, which has really been this podcast and this team. So I've been a trip report guest twice. I've become personal friends with Shannon. And now this is really the only podcast and Disney World site that I use and recommend to people who ask me how to find out about planning Disney trips. So it's a wonderful space. I really, really found a lot of connection and community in it during the pandemic, particularly, which is when I joined the Patreon. And it's really created a wonderful community that I very, very much value being a part of. So thank you, Shannon, for all that you do, and to everyone on your team as well. Congrats on the 500th episode. I'm sure there will be 500 more, and I will be listening to them all. Bye.
Aw, thank you, Sharon. I mentioned she was the fourth most downloaded episode and that she was a real life friend and just started her own podcast. She also runs a Run Disney Facebook group that is just for patrons because they do their own meetups during Run Disney events.
Congratulations, Shannon, and all your behind the scenes crew on your 500th episode. I wanted to send a quick note to tell you how much I love the podcast and listening to all the trip reports and feeling like I am right there in Disney with everyone, which during this long, cold winter is pretty appreciated. On a more personal and mildly cheesy note, the podcast has really helped to facilitate a connection with my son. We first started listening in preparation for one of our trips in May 2023 when he was 4.5 and his little sister was 9 months. And we went for 4 days and we had a great time. I even summarized our trip on a podcast episode with you, which he requested to listen to so much that I ended up putting it on a MyOut card, and he still listens to it all the time on his Yoto. We listened to the podcast before, unbeknownst to him that he was going, and it really helped me with planning. But he also loved it, and he would always ask me if we could listen to the Disney Talking. Now he's 7, and he still calls it the Disney Talking. He refers to Shannon by name as if he knows her personally. Mama, can you put on the Disney Talking, please? Mama, when we go to Disney World next, we should go on the train first, just like they did. Or, Mama, when we go to Disneyland, we should go at Christmas because Shannon says it's best at Christmas. Shannon's word is golden. He loves the trip reports just as much as I do and all the tidbits of information along the way. Your podcast has really helped bring Disney into our lives daily, and we listen on the way to school, activities, and on the way home. And it's just really helped him to become my little Disney buddy. He immerses himself in all things Disney and how things work, from behind-the-scenes attraction videos to figuring out how the rides work. It will not surprise me one day to see him working as an Imagineer at Disney World. I just know that he's going to be my Disney buddy for life. So thank you for helping make that happen. Congratulations, Shannon and crew, and I'll be listening to your 1,000th episode in a couple of years. Well done.
Oh, that's a sweet one to end on. Erin was a previous podcast guest when she traveled with a toddler and an infant. Thank you for that, Erin. I appreciate it. Multiple people have mentioned 500 more episodes, and I started doing the math. So I'm like, do you know how old I'll be? We'll see. It takes a long time to do 500 episodes, but a lot has changed. I'm recording this in the 3rd floor of my townhome in Puerto Vallarta with the ocean 3 blocks away, on video, on my laptop and camera and everything. So it's very different than sitting in my bedroom closet in Texas with an iPad, but some things have stayed the same. The intro music and outro music has stayed the same. I really like the helpful information, whatever form that takes. So looking forward to just seeing what the next chapter is. And I think that's going to be it. In true solo Shannon episode form, this is going to be much shorter than if there was a guest or somebody else to converse with. But I think that is enough. So thank you for joining for this episode. Thank you for being a listener. And I look forward to many more.